Good morning and welcome to Many Paths, Many Visions, brought to you by the Labyrinth Society and with your host, Christiana Brinton. My guest today is Susan Alexjander, a workshop presenter at the TLS Gathering this year, the Labyrinth Society Gathering this year. Susan is a classical composer, sound designer, and scientist, biomusician, educator, performer, and radio producer who has taught, exhibited, and presented her quote, soundscapes around the world, both collaboratively and individually for the past 25 years. Hi, Susan. Welcome to Many Paths, Many Visions. Thank you for joining me today.
Hi, Christiana. Thank you. This is a pleasure.
Well, first I want to offer full disclosure to our guests, listeners out there, to those who will be listening to the recorded version. Susan and I have known each other since I called her up through a connection with Reverend Dr. Lauren Artress in 2009 when I was looking for a few bars of intro music for my Blog Talk Radio podcast show, Labyrinths in the News. And Lauren and Susan are old friends, and we'll get to that in a little bit. And when Lauren told me about Susan's DNA music, I was really intrigued, fascinated. So I listened to her album Sequentia and was really impressed by it, to put it mildly. So, and then Susan graciously allowed me to use a few seconds of the first cut on that album, Ecos, which stands for icosahedron, as my intro music. And I always, whenever I ran my podcast show, I always talked about her music and her. So it was really a wonderful way to get to know her, and I was really thrilled to see Susan's name listed as one of this year's workshop presenters. So that being said, I love interviewing guests who are not well known in the current Labyrinth community. But, Susan, you performed and were the music co-director for the performance A Gathering of Angels at Grace Cathedral in San Francisco in 1992 with Musica Divina, and you were the chant director for the Women's Dream Quest there from 1990 to 1994. Was this when and where you met Lauren and started to work with her, or how did this all happen?
I moved to the Bay Area in 1990, and I went to a talk at Grace Cathedral. I did not know Lauren, and she was talking about Hildegard of Bingen, and she held up a little ball in her hand, and on this ball was painted a labyrinth, and somehow this had to do with the talk. I don't remember what it was, but she said, "Oh, maybe someday we'll have a labyrinth in our church, ha ha ha." And something in me just went zing, because I knew quite a bit about Hildegard von Bingen at that point. I was very interested in her. So afterwards, I went up and I talked to Lauren. I said, "Are you really going to do this?" And she said, "Oh, I don't know. I just kind of said that. I've just kind of been thinking about it." And I said, "Well, if you do, I want to help you. I'm on board." And so she took me up on it. And so I helped her to find some people that would enable her to make this happen. So fast forward, I got involved. I said, "Well, we have to have music to this walk." And so I put together some people that I knew from a Sufi choir, Miranisa Douglas, and we were co-directors. I mean, I was sort of the producer of it, but she was the director. And we did this beautiful music in the cathedral to the walks and so forth. And that launched me into, I did the Women's Dream Quest chanting only one time. It was just one time. I wasn't heavily involved with that. But that was my background intro to Lauren Artress. Yeah. And I left in 95. And when I left, she had just taken the original canvas that we'd painted and made it into, turned it over into the rug. And then the order of the Grace Cathedral Labyrinth, as I'm sure your listeners know, is there was first a canvas one for a few years, which we rolled up and put away. And then she had a rug made, and then she had a permanent one installed. So that's the history.
Cool, very cool. I had no idea you were involved with that aspect of the very beginnings of Veriditas and Lauren's interest in labyrinths. That's a wonderful tidbit of information that it's good to know. So usually I ask my guests about how labyrinths came into their lives to give our listeners a bit of personal history, but in your case, I want to focus on just your gathering workshop because you are so accomplished, and we just did that little bit of history. So that was a tidbit right there. And but you're so accomplished. We could go off in tangents so easily and use up the time we have. So let's stick to the workshop that you're doing. It's titled "Black Holes, White Holes: A Sound Journey." So I did a little homework, and I'm wondering, is this the same basic material from your Portal Soundscape Black Holes, White Holes presentation given in 2015 at the National Academy of Science in Washington, D.C.? And then with a little bit of different title, you then went to Budapest, Hungary, and Vienna, Austria, also with this in the next year in 2016. Is this the same basic material?
Well, yes and no. I work with a sculptor back east. We collaborate on, I think we've done about 6 projects. Her name is Rebecca Kamen. She's a wonderful artist and sculptor. And she got us the gig at the National Academy of Science, and it was her idea to do white holes, black holes. So what we typically do is, I'm actually not science trained. I wish I were, but I'm not. But I did my homework on black holes. I met some people at MIT who had actually recorded, it's not quite accurate, they had sonified the sound of 2 black holes circling around each other. In other words, they had taken the data and turned it into sound. It's called sonification. And more scientists are learning how to do this. And I'm taking a little side tangent here because this is really, really important, Christiana. The marriage of science and art is starting to come together. And when these scientists map their data into sound, they can get a whole new world of perception. And it's much easier to hear certain patterns in sound than it is to see them on the screen, right?
Yeah.
So, this is my collection process over the years, or actually for a year. So then Rebecca and I put this together. She did the sculptures and I did the sound. Then in Europe, I was invited by the International Light Association, which is a fabulous group if you've never run across them. People who are all sorts of people who are involved in light, scientists, healers, artists, and they invited me to come to Vienna to give this talk. It was slightly different than the one I'm going to give to you at the Labyrinth Society, but basically it's the same music. The one I'm going to give you at the Labyrinth Society focuses more on my longing for a new mythology around black holes. And I thought it would be perfect for the Labyrinth people because you're already there. You're already immersed in this myth of transformation.
Okay.
So that's kind of the background.
So that leads into my next question because when a workshop presenter submits a proposal, it doesn't have to align with the theme of the gathering, but I'm curious about, and so now I sort of understand this is about transformation. So this material and its connection to labyrinths has to do with transformation. So I understand that number one, it was handy because we're having it out in the Pacific Northwest. The TLS is having it in the Pacific Northwest, which is not far from where you live. But why this year? Why submit a workshop proposal to TLS given the theme, which is honoring the labyrinth environment, co-creating with nature. So maybe, I mean, it's obvious black holes are a part of nature, although that it is a cosmic understanding of that. So, um, can you
Well,
talk a
I
little bit
didn't
more?
sure. I didn't specifically pick this year. I was kind of urged by some of my friends, Jody Lormer and Ursula Press. Oh, this looks like a really interesting talk. You should, apply to the Labyrinth Society because it is going to be so close to you. And so I did. I mean, it was really as simple as that. Yeah, that's it,
Yeah.
basically.
Okay, good. Well, I'm glad they did. I'm glad they did.
Me
Um,
too.
so, okay, so let's talk about this idea of transformation. In the paragraph about your workshop, you wrote, Portal is a soundscape which journeys into the labyrinthine world of space, ending in the center of a black hole, unquote. And so other authors you come across will use the term labyrinthine to mean something more maze-like rather than a single unobstructed path leading into a distinct center. So what do you mean by this sentence? And how would you translate what is most often experienced as a physical act, like walking the labyrinth or tracing a finger labyrinth, into a pure sound experience for your participants?
hmm Well, I'm going to start with playing the piece when I give my talk. It's only 9 minutes long, and then I'm going to talk for a while, and then I'm going to play it again at the end because I want people to have an experience of the sound, knowing nothing about what I'm going to say, and then a second experience after we talk. So to get to your question, um, I really wanted to focus on the theme of a myth. And I've been, rereading Joseph Campbell and so forth, who is so amazing. And he keeps talking about a myth. It's not only a journey, so you're not only going into something like the center of a labyrinth or a portal, but you're coming out of it. So it's an in and an out. It's a back and it's a back and forth. So that's very important. What else can I say about that? Myths sort of. I'm trying to find some particular thing. That's why I'm pausing here, which I cannot find. But anyway, a function of a myth is to open the mind and heart to the original mystery, right? And
Yes.
from there, once it opens the heart, I mean, that's why science is feels a little cold to people, because until it really touches our heart, it hasn't really gotten in there. It hasn't become personalized, but they're getting closer. And that's part of what I want to talk about in my talk is how science perceives the black hole and what the latest revelations in science are revealing about. They're getting closer and closer to what I would call transcendent myth, which is very interesting. So it's a mystery. It's trying to teach us how to proceed. It wants to teach us what our place is in nature. So if we can relate to a black hole from this perspective, like, okay, I'm going in and I'm coming out. It's like a breath. What am I learning there? Where am I going? What does this teach me about my place in nature, in the world?
Okay, so the title is Black Holes, White Holes. Can you, I'm digressing here, can you give a brief uh, explanation of the difference between the two?
Yeah, well, in the past, I mean, science has only taught us about the black hole, right? Once you get sucked in, that's it.
Yeah.
So, of course, all of us are wondering, well, what happens to the light? It has to go somewhere. And science has not been addressing this at all until very lately. Until very lately, and there have been some very interesting theories. And they're all theories because this is theoretical physics, right? A
Yes.
theory is a story. So when you're dealing in these cosmologies and theoretical physics, you're talking about a theory, you're talking about a story. It's not anything that you can take into the lab and prove conclusively. So if you look at science from that perspective, you know, as story, then we can jump over and say, okay, well, let's create another story for our culture. Because another thing that Campbell is talking about is myths constantly change through cultures, and they're reflecting what a culture wants to understand, what a culture wants to express. Also, a personal myth. When you walk into a labyrinth and you create a story, okay, there's something going on in your head. It doesn't have to be A to Z, but you know what I mean. So there's a narration going on, and then you come out. That is something that you personally have wanted to express. So this is at the heart of a myth. So, yeah,
So,
we can go on from there.
okay. So, okay. Now I've got so many questions. Um, so you're, to me, when I think of black holes and white holes, I think of all of the science fictions, movies and things like that, and uh, Farscape, whatever, um, and that they don't come out the other side. But what you're saying is that these, even the exploration of these, is mythical in terms of the story, the what you're experiencing as you're exploring these, as you're finding for the scientists themselves, not just, we don't have anybody who has gone into a black hole and come back out again. We don't have a spaceship that's done that yet or anything else. But the scientists there are already stories, already myths about them. And what you're saying is
Exactly.
that this is changing now that we know, that we understand that there's a connection, that this is a transpersonal experience almost. With
Yes, I think you really got it. You really got it nailed there. And in my talk, I'm going to show two ancient sciences that talked about black holes, and I think that they would have considered themselves sciences, but they were also stories. And they expressed those ancient cultures. One of them is from ancient India, and the other one is the Mayan culture. And they both had to do with the psyche of the black hole and what that meant for a connection to consciousness. And that was their way of explaining in their time. And it might hold some value for us today. I'm not going to make a judgment about that. I happen to be attracted very much to both of them. I think they're very beautiful. But this always comes back to consciousness and how we are relating to our place in nature. How do we connect through our consciousness with every natural process going on? And when you come right down to it, this is a huge topic.
yes,
Ugh.
yes,
But when you come right down to it, literally it's in ourselves. And these myths are assisting us to raise consciousness so that we can actually get to that point to see that this light is within ourselves. Now, that's a big leap, and our society may or may not get there in my lifetime. I don't know. But this is sort of my mission as an artist, to crack open the light and say, well, yeah, you're creating this story. This is you.
Okay, in your bio, you wrote composer, quote, composer Susan Alexjander's work addresses the interconnections between light, sound, and our universal stories. This is what you're talking about. Do you feel that the sound work that you've done, and I don't know if you're still doing this, but the body of work, and it's a major body of work, finding and recording the musical patterns within elemental vibrations, the DNA strands, pulsars, NASA space sounds, the mapped binary pair trajectories, earth sounds, etc., is proof of this interconnectedness, this acknowledging that we all have this light within. And tell me how the labyrinth fits into this.
Well, proof is a pretty strong word.
Yeah.
I think the proof is within the individual. I mean, someone is going to listen and say, well, that was pretty. Another person is going to listen and say, oh my God, that just resonated so deeply within me that it's opening up something in me, because it has to come back to the personal. So, basically that's my goal, is to glorify the universe and sort of bring access to the mystery. For instance, the things that I do are, unusual to say the least. So at this point in time, they're mysterious to a lot of people, including me, because some of these sonifications that I do from science are new, and they're very beautiful, blah, blah, blah. But in 40 years' time, they'll still be beautiful, but they might not be mysterious. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Now, where I'm going with this is, because I get a chance to present them as sort of new and exciting and mysterious, that's a thrill for people, because they go, oh, I never thought of that. I never heard of that. Now I can make these connections between elements and atoms and sound and the body, and that's kind of my way into the mystery. So that's a tool that I have as an artist, and I think every artist is so lucky to be able to work in whatever medium they do, because they are really, the interface between cultures and mythologies as well. They're the thing that numinous thing that you can't put your finger on, but that guide you into some place that's very mysterious and personal, and it's just exciting. But, Joseph Campbell was also absolutely fascinated and in love with art and artists. And he had many, many artistic friends, painters and poets and dancers and musicians, and because he saw the value of that in trying to help create myths for our culture. So if I can stand on another soapbox and say that with my art, I'm really dedicated to walking the beauty path. I just don't want to create ugly art. Thank you. I can kind of see the value of it, maybe, in certain other ways. But as far as a connection to the labyrinth, I just think that's a personal thing for somebody who's walking a labyrinth. Anyone who's had experience listening to music, and that can be a tricky thing because you have to pick music that does not interfere with the labyrinth walker's journey. For instance, it can't be a Bach fugue, or it can't be, a Beethoven sonata, because all of those patterns are going to take over the brain. So it has to be something very amorphous and subtle.
Well, I agree. In my experiences, and this is one of the things that I learned from Lauren Artras years ago, both during my training, certification training as a Labyrinth facilitator, but also working with her afterward in different locations. In the early days, she would call the certified facilitators up and say, "Hey, I need people here, I need people there," and if we were available and in this area, we would go and facilitate. And I also did it at Shard, and her watching her decide on the music that would be appropriate for the specific labyrinth event that she was about to do with the attendees was a real lesson for me. And I remember very clearly picking a piece of music that we both loved, and we both said, "Oh yes, that might work," and starting to play it and realizing instantly that it was not the right thing for that moment, that the energy in the room with the people who are about to walk the labyrinth right there wasn't conducive. What would not, the music would not be helpful to them, would not
Right.
be supportive for them. So I totally understand where you're coming from with that. And it's interesting because what I was next going to ask you about is that on your website, oursounduniverse.com, you Eric Larson, you have a quote from Eric Larson, who is the co-developer of the Cymoscope, the scientific instrument that makes sound visible. You were talking about it before, and he calls you a universal sonic toolmaker. And you explain by saying, "I'm a toolmaker because my music aligns with the underlying vibrational nature of our universe and assists others in finding their own place and meaning within our resonating world." And for me, I have always found that for people walking, especially if they're new at walking labyrinths, um, that music is invaluable in helping them shift from pure logical, "I have to get through this, I have to finish, I have to reach the goal" kind of thinking, to a willingness to let that right brain intuitive uh, connectedness come forth. So,
Mm-hmm.
so I think
Well,
that,
I'm really glad that you liked that quote and that you found it, because I was just thrilled when he said that. I mean, he he was just sitting there, and all of a sudden he just sat bolt upright, and this big beam smile came over his face, and he said, "I know what you are. You're a sonic toolmaker." And I loved it because I think that gets more to the artisan craft side of what I love to do. I love to think of myself as constructing this stuff, you know. I think composers feel that way too. But well, I'm glad to hear that about Lauren, because when we first started out with Musica Divina in Grace Cathedral, we did have to experiment a lot, and we're quite disappointed when we thought, "Oh, this beautiful Bach aria or something is not going to do it." Um, it kind of has to be like background movie music. You know how you go to a movie and you come out and thinking, "Oh, I just love that music, but I can't remember a bit of it." That's what the Labyrinth music needs to do. It needs to be so much in the subconscious background, because, as I said, the brain will take over. The
well,
brain loves patterns.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes, brain loves patterns. I get that. Um, in my experience, the with the music, I have found that music that is not something recognizable to people is often, and obviously with nothing with words, but not recognizable. So I will often use Indian chanting, or when I'm playing my own instruments or drumming, either Native American or Indian kirtan kind of chanting.
yeah, that is perfect. That is perfect, perfect, perfect. Because it's cyclical,
Yes.
and that it creates the container. It's a beautiful thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that, but it does. I think that you can use this music, and I would say with sequentia, it is certainly something that can be used as a background music when people are
I
walking
think
the
so
labyrinth.
too.
Uh,
Yeah, I think so too, Christiana.
yeah,
Mhm.
because
I do, because it's different, but it's familiar. I mean, people sometimes describe it as organic. And I think what they mean by that is that their body can take it in very easily. And yet it's arresting because it's a little bit different. So it's both mysterious and comfortably familiar. It's very extraordinary how that turned out.
yeah,
Anyway,
and so from my experience with people walking the labyrinth, it has provided the support for more impactful, deeper experiences on the labyrinth. And I have to say, especially with when you have groups of people walking together, it is easier to create that because the energy, the often the energy is there already. Their willingness propels them into deeper, impactful, mythical experiences, personal experiences of
mhm.
interconnectedness and light. And what do you think about that? Yeah.
Yeah, I just personally love walking a labyrinth with other people. That's a total joy to see it all mixed up and coming together, going apart. I just adore that. Yeah,
Yeah.
profound.
So you write, quote, I'm an activist for two things: a cosmological vision that unites modern science with ancient and indigenous ways of thinking and perceiving, and personal empowerment. My work, alone or in collaboration with other artists, goes beyond entertainment into an intimate realm, mysterious, electric, and hopefully beautiful, where a listener can feel an unbounded expansion of home and live life from that aligning place of power. First of all, why do you think it's so important to unite modern science and ancient indigenous ways of thinking and perceiving?
Well, basically, I think they're saying the same things. Science is, there have been so many discussions about this, but science is getting closer and closer to a holistic view of the world, which I think is the way to go. From the entanglement theories, we're now seeing that you can't touch one thing without it affecting everything else. Most people know that, as the butterfly effect, but it is true. It is very true. Um, I don't really have much to add to that discussion other than the fact that the the ancient sciences, I mean, one of the sad things to me is that these ancient Greek, Roman, Byzantine, Sumerian, Egyptian, Indian, especially Indian, the Vedic scriptures and so forth, their science was sound. It was a sound cosmology. I mean, people were so conversant with that vocabulary. For instance, even in Greece, they understood the science of harmonics, the physics of harmonics, so well that the educated class, the educated philosophers and so forth, they would sometimes throw puns back and forth and speak in theoretical puns, referring to the intervals. Well, if you take the fifth of this, you get the seventh of that, or whatever. They make jokes about it. I mean, this was soaked in the culture. And because the sound is so important, because it's, somebody once said to me, sound is right in between spirit and matter. It's not matter, and it's not pure spirit. I should say it's not pure matter. It's right in the middle. It's a current in the middle, and it can take us between those realms. So I would like to see science come more and more back to that, to an understanding of sound and harmonics and how things resonate together through vibration and frequency, and how things talk to each other through frequency. I don't know if we have time, but I'll just get on my soapbox for a minute, because I think every science lab in the country ought to have an artist on the team, a visual artist, and a musician who understands the physics of harmonics, period. Because they're missing these big pieces when they're overlooking the correspondences of resonance. And that can be electromagnetic resonance, it can be sound resonance. They're pretty much, all together there. And just a brief, for instance, I had a chance to go to Rice University Lab, which is the home of the famous buckyball. Okay, that little soccer ball thing that they discovered?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
On the molecular level. And this guy was talking along, and he was showing me some numbers, and I looked at the numbers, and I said, oh, those two things are relating in a perfect fifth, a proportion of 3-2. I said, they must be in a very strong resonance together. And he looked at me with this blank look. And I thought, oh my God, he doesn't understand resonance. So this is a long way around, answer to your question, which actually I don't even remember. I don't remember what your question was, but it's all about resonance.
Yeah.
And when you walk the labyrinth, it's about resonance and being in resonance with those other people on that labyrinth and feeling that beautiful shift, as they're moving, something is happening on a very subtle resonant level. So it's great.
So this is the intimate realm that you're describing, this and this this sense of expansion of home. What does home mean? It is outside of the five senses. It is transpersonal. It is incorporates. It is cosmic.
Yes, it's the divine within, and the divine within is not cut off from everything else. It is connected with everything else. So that's home.
Fabulous.
That is home.
So,
and if our culture could get that, we wouldn't, think of all the problems that we wouldn't have.
Yes. Well, get it and keep it. Get it and hold on to it. Get it and, grok it. The term from Dune, grokking. Like it's a part of all, like that takes the place of all of the rote cultural you know, stuff that we've had, religious, whatever, that we've absorbed, the pablum, and becomes our reality. You know, it
Of
needs to
course,
be
and
our
yeah.
reality for us to
Well,
act
it's the
from that.
separation that's killing us,
Yeah.
and that's why, I would love to if we could just learn from these indigenous cultures. And I think maybe these indigenous cultures are going to be our saviors,
Yeah.
if we can really listen to them and understand how they connected to everything. And it's, I'm sorry, but science has been very complicit in this separation, and it's sad to see. But I really do feel that it's slowly turning around and changing, from the very discrete that scientists do so brilliantly to more of the big picture and interconnection. I think it's happening.
So very quickly, because I want to make sure we do have an attendee on with us today, which is wonderful. And I
Hmm.
want to make sure that I have time to get her question answered, or questions. So what would you like the participants in your workshop to take home with them from your workshop?
Oh, I just want them to have a blast. I just want them to listen to the piece. It's a very dynamic piece. It builds up to quite a wonderful crescendo. And I just want them to have their own personal journey and have fun and relate it to themselves. That's just what I want.
Great. And are you working on one more question, are you working on anything currently, as we speak, in terms of
Yeah,
exhibitions
I'm
or?
working on. Well, I also do. I also do normal music. For instruments, Western instruments. So the piece that I'm working on is for viola and soundtrack, and I've just begun it, but it's very fascinating. It's a commission for a young woman who is blind, and so I'm very fascinated to work with that aspect of her being, and that's what I'm working on.
And you're working on this piece so that she can play it, or what is she doing with the music that
Well,
you're
she
creating?
commissioned it for a performance coming up in next winter. So I asked her if she'd ever worked with a soundtrack, and she said, "Oh, that might be fun." So um, that's yeah. I've just barely begun, so I have some ideas.
Cool.
So she'll play it. She's a very good violist,
Uh-huh.
and there'll be a running soundtrack in the background.
Oh, very interesting. And where is this going to take place?
This will be premiered at Portland State University here in Portland.
Okay. Terrific. Um,
Hmm.
okay, so I am going to cut to the person who is on with us if they'd like to unmute themselves and give us your name and where you're from, and then ask whatever questions you would like to ask. Hello?
Hi, I'm Annelle Tanner, and I'm from Central Louisiana. I just recently, actually last year, took the certification workshop, and I'm very interested um, in hearing and in applying the music that you're talking about to some of the walks that I'm leading. I really have not been able to find um, music that I have really felt like would work for just all of the walks that I've been using. And I do a lot with children, and I'm wondering if you've had any experience in using this music with children and any responses you've had with this.
Oh, that's an interesting question. First of all, it's great to hear from you in that part of the country, and I hope that everything's going well for you with all the kerfuffle and upheaval out there. As far as children go, I have been told by certain people that they thought some of the sequentia music, the alternative tunings, would be very helpful with autistic children. And I tried to do a little experimentation with that. I sent it around to some autistic centers and said, well, would you like to try this? And so far, nobody has even tried it. So I don't know. But what you could do, Anel, is if you go on my website, oursounduniverse.com, you can have little snatches, listen snatches of everything that I've got. And it should be enough of a sample for you to get a feel for it. And then you can go from there. Does that help?
Yeah, it helps a lot. I'm one of the reasons I got into this was we have a granddaughter who has cystic fibrosis, and she has got intense anxiety. And so one of the things we were trying to do is help find tools for her that she can use within herself, when she feels that anxiety comes. And so that's one part that's very interesting. We also have a son who is an administrator who manages an autism program in Colorado. We just recently built a 45-foot labyrinth on his site for him to, on his farm, for him to use with some of his clients with autism. And I'm fascinated by what you're saying here in making this kind of music maybe available for him to use with his clients as they walk the labyrinth that we just built for him.
Oh my goodness. Well, I would love to know what you find out there, because that would just be a total joy. I'll tell you, this sequentia, which is the first one I did with these DNA tunings, which are absolutely gorgeous, by the way. And I've had that album has been out since 1988. Okay, it's like old, ancient history. I've taken it everywhere. I've gone to bookstores, given talks, you name it. I have only had 2 people who ever said, oh, that's a little uncomfortable for me. And one of them was a man who was so seriously, oh gosh, what's a nice way to put it? His body was in crisis. I mean, he was so out of balance in his body that he couldn't even listen to it. But two people out of thousands. So I think, and I've had people in workshops have pretty extraordinary experiences. I mean, one woman came in, she couldn't move her arm for some reason. Her arm was frozen down by her side. The next day, she came back after listening to Sequentia, and she was fine. Now, wow. I have a disclaimer to make here. I don't know if the music had anything to do with it or not, but she claimed it did.
Yeah.
But it does seem to be very balancing, very calming, and very organic and non-invasive. So, give it a try. See.
And
I would love to be able to help your little girl. I have one other suggestion for your little girl. Do you have a pencil?
Yes.
If you write down Joshua Leeds, Leeds,
okay,
and you Google him, he has an album which calms animals. Now, it really works. My daughter has a very neurotic dog, and it's a blessing. Wow. But it also works on people. So just, check that out. You won't have any trouble finding.
I'm going to be at the gathering, and I am looking forward to attending your workshop. This has been fabulous.
Oh,
Oh,
I'm so glad I get to meet you, Anel.
Yes,
is it
Wonderful.
Anel or Linnell?
Anel,
Anel.
Ann.
And Al, I would like to chime in here. I think Susan, she can buy any of your music off of your website, correct?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I can. It's and it's easy for you to actually just download it, electronically, unless you don't like doing that, in which case I could send you a physical CD, but it's much easier to get it downloaded if you like.
yeah.
That
So I
So
would
can
be
your
just
s-
send
great.
you any file. Hmm?
so your son can do the same thing for his center
Yes,
in Colorado.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah. And I
Well, what
and
happens
speak.
is you'll get the file, and then when you click on it, do you have a Mac?
No,
Your
I
PC?
don't. It's not. Yeah, mine's a PC.
Okay. Well, we'll figure it out. I mean, I don't know how PCs do it, but basically you just download it, click it, and it'll open, and you have it.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
that's great.
Al, I want to say one more thing. I can't wait to meet you too, because obviously be at the gathering. But um, in my experience working with children on a labyrinth, there's less in the way.
Yeah, right.
No matter what physical conditions they have, or emotional conditions, there's less in the way, and they will pick up and resonate with music that cuts to the chase, that is outside of what most adults are comfortable with very often. And
Yeah,
which is the true about labyrinths themselves. I mean, they get it a lot faster. They are much more comfortable on them. They run, they play, they sit in the
they
center and they
do.
talk. So I wouldn't be afraid to use Susan's work at all with them. And like we were saying before, I would have a couple of different ones available. And then depending on be aware of the energy of that day, of what you're doing in that moment and the kids, and then sort of intuit which one would work best. And there's lots of cuts on Sequentia. You don't have to play the thing all the way through. You can, I used Icos, the first cut, but so you can actually create a playlist, which what I do when I give my labyrinth walks, is I create a playlist of music that sort of blends and leads from one to another. That's a lot of work. I don't know if but what I'm saying is that there's a lot of ways to use her music. And my suggestion is just be aware, like what we were talking about before, that the energy can change, and so what you think was the right thing to use might not be the right thing to use, and that's just a learning process.
That was fascinating, and I really found it fascinating when Susan was talking about working with Lauren and and having selected a piece and then realizing that wasn't going to fit the situation. And I would love to hear more about that that process. I mean, not right now, but I'm just saying that was really fascinating.
Yeah, that was Christiana, by the way.
Well,
That was
Oh,
her experience.
but
Yeah.
you did mention that you were with when you were doing the Musica Divina, the Bach that wasn't going to work, and you were disappointed in that. So Susan, you actually started the conversation, and then I
Okay.
and added.
Yeah, Lauren wasn't involved with that, but she was learning and watching. So obviously when you had your encounter, she
Yeah,
figured it out.
years
Uh-huh.
later, because I did
Yeah.
mine in 98, 99. So yeah, And I think, I don't know how they teach in the certification process now in terms of musical selection and how to do that. Is that still a part of the basic teaching? Basic?
Oh, oh yes, and there are several that are suggested
Yeah, yeah.
in it too, and
Yeah.
several that are used obviously throughout the training that are wonderful. The walks that I've chosen that I have done have not lent themselves to using much music at all. They've been outdoors during a music festival, or they've
Yeah.
been indoors during a Sunday school or a church experience, or you know, I, that the but I just have been looking for in the process of looking for music that I really felt would be appropriate to some of the ones that are coming up.
Okay. Yeah, well, Sequentia is definitely a very interesting, and her Susan's rest of her music is a very interesting choice. And if you feel that it's too unusual for your audience, so there are many beautiful. I tend to go towards, because I love it, harp music, and acoustic guitar, acoustic piano, uh, those kinds of background music. And I do my own drumming, um, but that kind of music that is somewhat can be somewhat ethereal to begin with, depending on the instrument used, is sometimes valuable when you're. And there's a lot of choices out there, a lot of music available. Um, I don't know if we have anything on the TLS website like a list, uh, but I can certainly send you. If you want to leave me, can you type right in the chat area on
Yes,
and write in your email address? Or just, you can give it to me right now, actually. Just give that to me right now, and I will write it down, and I can send you a list. So, what is that?
I'm typing it into the chat area so you can.
Okay, just never mind. I can write it down right now. What is your email address?
Okay, it's all lowercase ANNELLE,
Uh-huh.
T is in Tom, ANNER,
Okay.
at M is in mother, B is in boy, T is in Tom, B is in brother, T is in Tom, .net.
Oh, that's interesting. I've never heard that one before. mbtabt.net. Anel
Yeah,
Tanner. Okay.
right.
Okay. I will send you whatever I have, whatever I can find in my files, and
That'd be
you're
great.
certainly welcome to them. Whatever I have. Um, And when you go to the Labyrinth Society gathering, you will get plenty of help there.
Yes,
you you just ask and you will receive. I promise you. So
I totally. I went to the Houston one, and Kay
okay,
Muter was my trainer, and
okay.
her musical background is wonderful.
Oh yes, yes, absolutely. It totally is. Yeah. So you've got lots of help there. It sounds like to me.
Yes.
So all right. Well, Susan, I guess if you are you and Elle, do you have any other questions for Susan?
No, I just really appreciate this and look forward to meeting you in October.
Oh, I
Okay.
do too, Anil. That'll be great.
All right. So, Anel, if you wouldn't mind just muting yourself, and we will finish this session, this episode. Thank you so much, Susan. It's been such a pleasure sharing this hour with you. Thank you for joining me today, and can't wait to see you in. I will be in Portland early, so maybe we can hook up a group of us, the ladies, to have a dinner together. That would be wonderful. But many
Oh, that would
continued
be fun.
blessings on your path. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Well, this was just a thrill to be asked, and really fun. And I hope it helped clear up some things, or people will come to the talk and really enjoy it.
Yes, I think they will. Thank you so much. So you've been listening to the Labyrinth Society's Many Paths, Many Visions, broadcast by Spreaker with your host, Christiana Brinton. Be sure to check the Labyrinth Society webpage, the Facebook page, and the global group, and their YouTube page for a list of upcoming dates and guests. Also, if this podcast has piqued your interest in the Labyrinth Society and you'd like more information about membership, please go to www.labyrinthsociety.org/membership. Thank you for listening to this podcast episode. Thank you, Anel, for joining us. And may you find what you need on your path through life. Namaste.